Hey, this is Jeff Opperly from the Calling and Career Office, and it is Thursday, finals week in a very quiet student center. And I've been thinking this morning about the class of 2020 and the new world, the brave new world, the new path that many of you will be encountering as early as later today or tomorrow as those finals end and you become a Taylor University graduate and you head into doing the work that you sense that God is calling you to do. And we have been blessed and privileged to be a part of that journey in some small part in the Calling and Career Office. And we hope that you'll see that every step is a part of that discernment process and seeing what it is that God has called you to do. And so today we're going to focus specifically on this idea of connections, because connections has become really the essential piece of our strategy in the Calling and Career Office. We believe that while you're getting an outstanding education inside the classroom, that you also need an education outside of the classroom, and that education most often takes place through connections to experiences that teach us a lot about ourselves, and also people that model and are examples of who we want to be more like and the work that we want to do. And so we all kind of know that connections are important. I'm introverted and I don't like networking. I don't like walking into a room and trying to win the room. I feel like sometimes when we think about networking and connections, it can feel sort of self-serving, maybe selfish in some ways, trying to make a connection or start a conversation for our own gain. And yet we need to really put that aside and acknowledge that connections aren't always just about self-serving. Sometimes they're really about learning and growing and developing, and those connections can be so vital. Depending on what research you read, anywhere from 70 to 85%, all the way up to 85% of jobs come by way of connection. And then when you add to that close to 75 to 80% of jobs maybe never even make it to being posted online, you realize that so many jobs, so many opportunities come through a conversation, a connection. Connections are vital. And so today I'm going to share with you just some very practical tips on how to do this well. Like I said, I'm introverted. It's not something that comes natural to me, but it's something that I have learned that has become such an instrumental part of my understanding of the work that God's called me to. And I believe it could also be instrumental in yours. So I'm going to share my screen and I have some slides that I'm going to take you through, and this is going to be really practical tutorial here. So the Calling and Career Office really focuses on its mission to make connections, to connect you to people and experiences, and that is how we get to our why. So I talk about the golden circle a lot, this idea that was proposed by Simon Sinek in a TED Talk years ago. Probably wasn't his originally either, but just this idea that it's so critical for not only for us as organizations and institutions, but also for us as individuals to operate first and foremost from the core, from the why. Many organizations know what they do, most know how they do, but very few truly operate from their why. And I think that's true of us as individuals too. It requires reflection. It requires pause and caution, and for us to stop and really think about, why do we really want to do the work that we say that we want to do? And so it's so critical for us to understand our why. And when we talk about the mission statement of the Calling and Career Office, that why is discernment. And so the mission of the CCO is to connect students to people and experiences that guide them in faith, in discerning a faithful response to God's call. And that discernment is our why. It's what we're here for. It's what this office exists for. And yet the what for getting to that why is those connections between students, building bridges between students and people and experiences that can be faithful instructors as we understand the next right step in responding faithfully to God's call. And yet the how of how to do this well can sometimes be pretty elusive. We know our why, that discernment is what we long for, right? We know that connections are maybe a part of that, especially as we think about specifically work and the jobs that we do. And yet when it comes to connections and making them, the how is really tricky. I was just talking with my student intern team in a staff meeting last week, and we were talking about these connections, and they were sharing with me, I know I'm supposed to be making connections. You've convinced me that these are vital, and yet I don't even know where to start. And so today's video is really focused on a really practical sense of, hey, here's a great way to start. Using the channels and the mediums that are available to you, how can you potentially make some good connections? And so we're gonna look at three different forms of contact, three different forms of connection: email, social media, and phone. So probably the one that we most often use is email. And with emails, it can be really tricky to know how to construct an email. In fact, one of the very specific feedbacks that I got from one of the students that I was talking with is, man, if you would just help us see how to just build a really well-designed email to make a connection with someone that I've never met before, I would take some notes. I would be all over that. So that's really what this is right here. When you think about writing an email to someone that you've never met before, now maybe you have something in common, like a Taylor University degree, or it's a friend of one of your parents, or some connection that you made through church. So there may be some common ground that you share, and yet it can be really difficult to start a conversation with someone that you've never actually maybe ever talked to face to face. But the email is really a great first step in making a connection. In fact, I think a good introductory email is always a great first step when you're trying to make a connection with an organization that you'd like to work for. And so I'm going to just show you really quickly some really simple some principles to keep in mind. First of all, when you start with the greeting, it's good to start more formal than informal. You don't want to just say hi or hello or just put the person's name at the top. If you're writing the email in the morning or the afternoon, you might say good morning. You don't want to make any assumptions, especially if the person is a little bit further along the path than you, that you might want to call them Mr. or Mrs. In that, but you want to stay on the formal side. Typically, if I have not met someone before, I'm going to say, hey, good morning, Mr. Smith, and start there. But you want to stay as formal as possible. And then the next paragraph, get into a little bit of an introduction. Don't just jump right into, hey, can we talk? Or I'd like to learn more about you. I think that the introduction is a way for you to set the stage. And this is a little bit like if you're having an interview and they start with the question, tell me a little bit about yourself. You just want to give a few things that provide some context. So again, in this example email, kind of set the context. Hey, we have this common bond through Taylor, and I have this degree that I've been working on in finance. And as I've started to think about opportunities that I'd like to pursue, I've been working on making some connections. You just want to set the stage of kind of where you're at, that you finished your degree, that you're ready for kind of that next step, and that you're seeking that connection. And then there's a request. And in the next paragraph, a simple request. And what I often would encourage you to do is to, in this request, just to keep it really simple, to just ask for advice. Don't necessarily jump right into asking for a job or a lead or a letter of recommendation or anything like that. Just ask for their advice. See if they would be willing to maybe have a phone call, or if opportunity would allow to meet for a cup of coffee or for a lunch. But make a simple request with respect for their time and their schedule, that you'd love to learn a little bit more about how they were once in your shoes, graduating from college and wanting to start a career in this path, and how they got from where they were to where they are now. The next piece, I think, is maybe one of the most important and maybe essential to the email, but it's always so important, especially if you don't know the person, to express gratitude that they're even taking the time to consider your request, gratitude that they would consider offering their advice and their counsel just to a student like you. And then make sure that you have some kind of professional signature. You don't want to just at the very end, just put your name or say thanks, Jeff. It's good to have some kind of professional signature. And I know for a lot of you, you may not know exactly what to include there, but just your name and Taylor University graduate, this degree is a great place to start. It doesn't need to be as full as what you see on the screen with my signature. But those simple 5 things in any email can be a really helpful way to break the ice, to make an initial connection. Your greeting, a good introduction of who you are and why you're reaching out, a simple request for their advice or their counsel, demonstration of gratitude, and a professional signature. Let's talk a little bit about social media, and most especially LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a really helpful way to make connections with people that you don't know, especially if you use the university search function. And that can be a really, really helpful way to find other Taylor grads who are doing the kind of work that you want to do. When you try to make a connection on LinkedIn with someone that you don't know, LinkedIn will often say, hey, would you like to add a note? Sometimes when you're requesting a connection on LinkedIn, it can be really helpful to give them some context for why you're asking for that. And I have found that can actually be a really, really great way to make sure that they understand who you are and why you're reaching out. The thing that's challenging about that is they only give you 300 characters to do that. And so what I often tell students to do is to open up a Microsoft Word document, and similar to that first paragraph that I just described in the email, the tell me about yourself paragraph, the context paragraph, write a 300 character introduction. Hey, my name is Jeff. I'm studying Christian ministries at Taylor University. I just recently graduated. I'm looking to make connections in Chicago, or I'm looking to make connections in this denomination, or whatever the specific ask that you're going to make. 300 characters goes really fast, and so you have to be strategic in how you use it. So here's an example of something that I've used in the past, and you can feel free to take and use any of this that would be helpful to you. But you might want to say something like this: Mr. Smith, I'm a senior marketing major at Taylor. I'm in the job search process and discovered on LinkedIn that you are a fellow TU graduate and have marketing experience at Salesforce. I'd love to get your advice. Could we connect through email? Thanks for any help you can offer. I think this is a really great place to start because it's a low investment. It's a pretty simple request for someone to respond to. You're giving them space and time to think about it, and the ask that you're making is just an email, which is something that they can respond to on their own time. Eventually, you might want to request a phone call, but I would say start by requesting an email connection, and then in that first or second email connection, then maybe ask for a phone call or an in-person meeting to have further connection and further advice. But that's, as you can see, 298 characters, and we squeezed a lot in there. A little bit about ourselves, who we are, what we studied, what we're searching for, kind of where we're at in the process, and how we could really benefit from their advice. I hope you see that those same 5 pieces, those same 5 elements are all evident in just these 298 characters. There's still a greeting, there's an introduction, there's a request, there's gratitude, and there's a simple signature. And those things, even though they're a lot less than what we, in terms of content of what we used in the email, I think those same 5 elements should be present in anything that you send out on LinkedIn if you want to set the tone correctly and really want to be respectful of people's time. Now, let's talk a little bit about phone, because my hope is that if you're able to make a good connection through email or through LinkedIn, that eventually you'll have a phone call, which can be a little bit daunting. You know, if you've never talked to this person before and you're like, what are we going to even talk about? I don't even know what we're going to say. But the phone call actually can go a long way. You can get a lot done in a 15, 20-minute phone call that would probably take somewhere like 15 to 20 emails, back and forth. And who knows how long that's going to take for you to respond, for them to respond. Phone calls are really efficient, but they can also be the most intimidating. So here's 5 phone tips that I want to encourage you to make sure that you keep kind of close by as you think about making these connections. First of all, always have an appointment for a phone call. I don't think it's wise, especially if it's someone that you have not established a relationship with, to just call them at any time without them knowing that the phone call is coming. So that's where that LinkedIn connection or the email can be a really great place to start by saying, hey, could we talk and could we schedule a phone call for maybe next Monday, 11 a.m.? Put that on your calendar. That way you have preparation, you have time, they have preparation and time, and you have the opportunity to not kind of blindside them, which can be frustrating, especially if you're not anticipating a phone call. Now, once you are on the line with someone that you want to connect with, there's some other things that I think you should really be focused on. Make sure you have some specific questions. It's good to go ahead and write down 3 to 4 questions and make them as specific as possible to their career path or the company that they work for, or even maybe their time at Taylor if it's a fellow Taylor connection. But have 3 or 4 very specific questions that you want to ask. Don't have any expectations that this is an interview, that this is some kind of specific interview that's going to at the end lead to some kind of job offer. Hey, if that happens, that would be great, but really your expectation should be advice. So go into it saying, hey, you're a little bit further down the path, I'm just starting on this path. What would you tell me? What would you say? What are some lessons that you've learned along the way that you would say to me, hey, here's some things that I would encourage you to be doing earlier in your career to get on the same trajectory that I am on. Look for common ground. So look for similar people that you might have interacted with, same professors that you might have had at Taylor, experiences that you had at Taylor if it's a fellow TU grad. If it's a city that you both know well, what do you have in common about that city? Are you both fans of the teams in that city? Do you both frequent specific restaurants? Those kind of things. That common ground can go a long way in establishing good rapport and demonstrating your ability to connect well, which again can set the stage for maybe some kind of opportunity with their organization. But lots of times the person that you're talking to is not immediately in a position to offer you something or to point you to a direct offer. And so it's really, really important that before you get off that phone call, that you say, hey, who else would you say that I should be talking to? Are there other Taylor grads or other people that you work with in the industry that you think could be really helpful to me? Who are those people that I need to be connecting with? And if they're willing, hey, would you actually be willing to introduce me to that person, either over email or by some way of connection? Could you introduce me, help me get my foot in the door? A great connection is someone that not only can give you good advice, but can also offer you the next connection. And really, that's how we've built our network here in the CCO. Every employer, every person that I've met with over the last 5-6 years that I've worked here in the office, I've always ended the conversation with, hey, who else do I need to be talking to? Who else is in your space that you really respect or admire and you think it would be good for our office to have a connection with? Remember, the guiding principle, just as it is in your other connections, is humility and gratitude. Show humility, don't have too many expectations of them, and always demonstrate gratitude for their time. Networking is such an interesting thing, right? And like I said, at times it can feel like a really difficult thing. And yet, when you think about just one conversation, and that's what this image is meant to demonstrate, just one conversation, one connection over LinkedIn, one email can lead to relationships and experiences that can really jumpstart your career. And so I hope this video has been helpful as you consider, what that will look like for you and making those connections. That's what our office is here for. And I especially want our graduating seniors to know we stay open. There's a lot of things that you can't continue to do once you graduate from Taylor, but the CCO remains open to you. And our job, my mission here is built around helping you make connections. And so while this video hopefully maybe was practical in some ways and getting you some first steps, I'd love to just have a conversation with you and help you figure out where to start, who to reach out to, what that strategy might look like. Just know that these connections are so important, not so much for the ways that they advance our career or help us move up some kind of arbitrary ladder, but they help tell a broader story. You are already, whether you've started your first job out of college or not, telling a story with your life. And it's so important to invite other people into that story. And those connections can be a big part of how we do that well. So hope the video is helpful to you. We will be available to you over the summer and ongoing from there to help you continue to make these connections, because our why is discernment, and our prayer and hope for you is that you will be able to discern a faithful response to God's call. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll be in touch soon.